It's probably 'cause my hat don't match my damn pants.
He was a legend. He was a phenomenal quarterback. It was the perfect storm of everything could go wrong went wrong.
And Brantley's hurt his knee. He hurt his knee on that play.
His sheer will, his sheer ability to lead is very unique and very special.
When you lose a hero, it takes a while to find a new one, and the Gators are still looking for their next one.
Tim Tebow's legacy in terms of the University of Florida, Gator fans, college football will never go away. He was one of the best college football players to ever play the game.
I've been around here since the late 1970s. Heroes at the University of Florida. In my time, Emmitt Smith, Tim Tebow, and Danny Werf, there have been 3 in 30 years. So when you lose a hero, it takes a while to find a new one, and the Gators are still looking for their next one.
People, young people, older people, men, women, I don't care, they still want heroes in sports. They still want that, and Tim personified that.
Florida had looked for a while to replace a legend in a coach like Steve Spurrier. And Tim Tebow came in his 4 years along with Urban Meyer and was able to rebuild Florida back into what it was under Steve Spurrier.
He really is a kind of a cultural icon. I think when it really hit me was it 2 years ago when I want to say Time Magazine named him one of the most influential people in the world. That goes beyond your typical, popular SEC football player. That goes into some new territory.
Tim embodies so many positive qualities, and when you have somebody who embodies so many positive qualities on your campus, he tends to be the guy people think of. Florida's like that, but it certainly, I think, helped the image of the university in an incredibly positive way.
Well, I think what maybe people take for granted about Tim is just his internal desire, his will. A lot of athletes don't have that, who are good.
And I remember standing next to him on the field before pregame, and I'd heard the talk about, well, I don't think he's much of a passer, his arm strength or whatever. And I watched him throw the ball 60 yards in the air, taking one step. And I saw the physical size of this kid, and I said, he can play, and he's going to be a great player at the next level.
Tebow time lasted 1,480 days for the Florida football program, its fans, and college football. But before the legend of Tim Tebow began, and the echoes of the name Tebow had drifted into the warm Florida air, the Florida football team was still trying to return to the glory days of the 1990s under Steve Spurrier. The 2005 season for the Florida football team would have been considered a success for most programs in the country. Led by first-year head coach Urban Meyer and junior quarterback Chris Leak, the 2005 edition of the Gators posted a 9-3 record and defeated Iowa in the Outback Bowl.
It's going to go into the end zone. Baker! Touchdown!
I think the fan base liked Urban. I think the fan base liked Chris. I think the fan base wanted to see Florida win more because they hadn't won much in 2002, 3, 4, and 5. Not a whole lot of wins there. Not a 10-win season in that stretch.
Anticipation, but kind of the wonderment. Can we get better? Can we be back to what Gator football was in the 90s? And people were curious and wondering what's going to happen.
An hour-and-a-half car ride northeast of Gainesville at Nice High School was the answer. An 18-year-old quarterback by the name of Tim Tebow.
He was a legend. He was a phenomenal quarterback at Nice, and everyone knew who Tim Tebow was. Everybody knew he could go anywhere in the country.
I remember on signing day, a lot of people thought it would be Florida or Alabama, and former Florida assistant, now North Carolina head coach, had developed a strong relationship with Tebow. And Tim called him and says, you know, what should I do? Because there was a coaching change. He wasn't sure if this was the right place between Florida and Alabama. I remember, you know, he was going to be a Gator had Larry and Florida's staff still been intact. And he says, you want to be a Gator. The reality of it is that it was a big deal in the state of Florida. It was a big deal in Jacksonville. It was a big deal for the Gator Nation. Maybe not nationally as big a deal as some of these top recruits that commit on signing day, but regionally that was a big deal. That was a big get for Urban Meyer and his coaching staff.
Tim Tebow officially became a Gator on December 13th, 2005.
I'll be playing college football next year at the University of Florida.
It was then that the 1,480 days of Tebow time began. When the 100th year of Florida football began, expectations for the Gators were tempered. Second-year head coach Urban Meyer came into 2006 with one of the best quarterbacks in Florida football history in Chris Leak and fan favorite Tim Tebow, both competing for time on the field. Florida defeated Southern Mississippi, Central Florida, and Tennessee in Knoxville before what seemed like a non-threatening matchup versus the Kentucky Wildcats. But when Tebow took the field that night, what happened next would lead to drama that until this day is still being debated.
Tim had come in and run three plays, I think it was, and he carried them all and got the ball down, and then they sent Chris Leak back in, and there was a cascade of boos.
Frankly, I was a bit ashamed of Gator fans.
And I've debated this with people ever since. I don't believe for a minute they were booing Chris Leak. I still don't.
That's tough for Chris Leak. You know, that's what I said. That's a circumstance you don't anticipate having as a top recruit.
I believe they were booing the decision to bring in Chris Leak. That's a different thing, meaning they were booing the coach. They weren't booing the kid.
It was explained to me that the fans weren't booing Chris Leak. They were booing Dan Mullen for putting Chris Leak back in, or Urban Meyer. Maybe that's the case, but the reality of it is that young man had to go through something that I think is a lot of guys would not have been able to handle it.
Chris Leak, I have tremendous respect for and always have. And Chris was a kid that just went out and did his job, didn't say much, but gave everything he had, and he deserved better than that. There was one game where, at the behest of someone, I sat in the stands and listened to Gator fans for a half criticize, ridicule, swear at Chris Leak because he wasn't Tim Tebow or he hadn't won a championship.
I've talked to people about it who were in the stands. The people I've talked to insist they weren't booing, so we don't know. We'll never know exactly what the truth of the matter is, but that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Whom the fans were booing that night may never be known, but that night, under the lights in the swamp, the legend of Tim Tebow rained down on Chris Leak, and it is a testament to Chris's character that he survived.
I think the fortunate part of that whole equation is Chris Leak. I think the fact that Chris Leak is such a quality guy, you know, if it had been a person in his role in that position of lesser character than Chris Leak, it would have been a big problem with a freshman coming in. But I credit Chris for that.
It took a guy with thick skin, a guy that understands the concept of team and University of Florida and what it means to be a winner. And I think Chris Leak knew that. I think what he did and what he went through was very difficult, but I think he handled it better than anybody I could possibly imagine.
Florida defeated Kentucky that night 26-7 to improve to 4-0 on the season. The following week, the Gators defeated Alabama at home. And next up was the LSU Tigers.
Homecoming at the University of Florida.
Tebow played sparingly as a freshman, but 15 was called on to make game-changing plays during his first year wearing the orange and blue. None more memorable from his freshman campaign than a second-and-goal play from the LSU 1-yard line in a tie ball game against Les Miles and the 9th-ranked LSU Tigers.
Oh, jump pass. How about that? Oh, my gosh!
That's one of the things that have made Tim Tebow the folk hero or whatever he is at Florida.
I remember saying, what is this? I mean, what is this, flag football?
Let's take it from a football standpoint. Tim Tebow runs the ball, runs the ball, runs the ball, and everybody in the world thinks he's going to run it in for a sneak, and all of a sudden, bam, comes up and throws that pass. Great football call.
I also remember thinking Tate Casey was never going to get up after he fell down. I thought he was going to fall over and miss it.
Florida lost the next week on the road to Auburn.
And he's going to try and kick it. He can't do it. Auburn picks up the ball. Trey Smith, touchdown Auburn, touchdown.
But reeled off 7 straight wins on the way to defeating Ohio State 41-14 to win the BCS National Championship, Florida's first national title since 1996. It was official. Florida football was back, and Tebow mania took off. The 2007 season was a special one for Tim Tebow. Tebow's first season as the full-time starter yielded all-time great stats, but the team's success was not there yet, with him being the lone signal caller. Still, Tim Tebow won the Heisman.
The winner of this year's Heisman Trophy is Tim Tebow.
The third in school history.
I think one of the reasons that he won the Heisman was that people around the country, voters, recognized that the team's progress and what they accomplished, the difference was Tim Tebow.
But the Gators fell short against Michigan in the Capital One Bowl.
Kenny to Manningham, touchdown.
Finishing the season a disappointing 9-4. The young Gators learned from the 2007 season and took that momentum into 2008.
I thought with the accumulation of talent that was at Florida, it would just be a matter of time before they won, and they won big.
I think in that first year, or that 2007 year, the defense finally decided going into that offseason that they were going to match the offense.
There were some lighter moments.
Tim and I used to sit down and talk every Tuesday, I think, and then they moved it to Mondays for Sun Sports. And it was a 5-minute one-on-one. It was never all that dramatic. But the year after, he had gone out, after I guess the 2007 season, and he had gone to the Philippines, and they had video and stories of him circumcising babies there for health purposes. And so the next time I had to sit down with him, I asked him about it, and then I said, does this give you a new weapon to keep your teammates in line? And it's the first time I ever made him blush.
This is an extraordinary period for America's economy.
It'll pump as much as $100 billion each into Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac.
Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac.
President Bush was signaling the problems facing Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac.
He has fallen in line behind the very same policies that have ill-served America.
A lot of small businesses can't get a line of credit. They can't get commercial paper.
Let's talk about the speed with which we are watching this market deteriorate.
But it'll be a while before our economy is back on both feet.
The 2008 financial crisis consumed the news cycle as Tim Tebow worked to prove his success would translate into more wins and possibly a national title for the Gators. Bank bailouts, a faltering housing market, and an increasing national debt were symptoms of what economists called the worst financial crisis since the Great Depression. But for the University of Florida football program, times were good and the money was rolling in. Revenue for the Florida football team in 2008 rose to $54.1 million, up $4.5 million from 2007 and $5.2 million from 2006.
The high that this program was riding was really unprecedented, and therefore certainly contributed to the financial spike that we saw.
With cash rolling in and seats full in the swamp, the sky was the limit for Heisman Trophy winner Tim Tebow and the 2008 Florida Gator football team. The Gators opened the season 3-0 with wins over Hawaii, a 26-3 drubbing over rival Miami, and a convincing road win over Tennessee.
Touchdown!
But the next game versus the Ole Miss Rebels presented an unexpected roadblock for the Gators.
3 for 5 on the year. Tebow is in the shotgun. 4th and game. There's the snap. Tebow trying to run. He's hit. He's surging forward. I don't think he got it. The Rebels hit him. And the way they've spotted it, it's going to be Mississippi football. That's it. The Rebels celebrate on Florida Field as Ole Miss and Houston Nutt snaps a 9-game SEC losing streak.
I thought Florida played the game stubbornly against Ole Miss. I think they tried too hard to show they were bigger and stronger and tougher and meaner and physicaler.
Pretty surprising. You don't, with that group, you don't expect to lose at home a whole lot. And with all due respect to Ole Miss, a team like that, and it obviously served as a wake-up call.
With high expectations and a Heisman Trophy winning quarterback, a loss to unranked Ole Miss could have derailed the rest of the season for the Gators. But that day, Tim Tebow spoke words in the post-game presser that will forever remain an important part of Florida football history.
I'm sorry, extremely sorry. We were hoping for an undefeated season. That was my goal. Something Florida's never done here. But I promise you one thing, a lot of good will come out of this. You have never seen any player in the entire country play as hard as I will play the rest of the season, and you never see someone push the rest of the team as hard as I will push everybody the rest of the season. And you never see a team play harder than we will the rest of the season. God bless.
Yeah, I was in the press room when Tim came in and answered all the questions and then delivered the speech that is forever emblazoned on this building. And it was interesting when he said it. I said that's either history or that's going to come back and bite him on the tush. And it turned out to be history, and it's a quote that'll live a long time around here.
As surprising or as upsetting as that loss was to some fans, in the end, I think it helped spur that team on to success.
But obviously the promise he made after the Ole Miss loss, all those things add to this, almost like mythical character, but there he was right before your eyes.
That said a lot about him. I think it showed how much he cared about his team, his teammates, the program. Not a lot of people would do that.
A lot of people talk about the speech, but I think what he did is I think he raised the level of urgency with his team, and that's what you want from your leader.
Would that result in winning every game the rest of the way? Time would tell.
After the Ole Miss loss, Tebow and the Gators won the next 7 games.
Touchdown, Percy Harvin.
By an average of 41 points. Up next for Florida was a rivalry game against Florida State in the pouring rain. But neither the rain nor thousands of fans doing the Seminole chop could stop Tebow. Will and determination were on his face, literally.
It looked like a scene out of Gladiator or something like that. It really did.
That's probably one of the games, one of the times that encapsulates Tim Tebow.
The fierceness in his eyes, the contrasting color on his face from the orange and blue that it was on his jersey. It was really a defining visual moment.
Against your arch rival, Florida State, it's raining, there's stuff on his face. That's just what Tim Tebow means to Gator fans. That particular game, the way it ended up, in the rain, all that mud and stuff on him, personifies that.
After defeating Florida State in Tallahassee, Tebow and the Florida football team went on to win the SEC title against Alabama. That win set up a date with the second-ranked Oklahoma Sooners, led by Bob Stoops and Heisman Trophy winner Sam Bradford.
I thought it would be a very, very difficult matchup for Florida.
Oklahoma was an amazing offensive team, tons of talent, and had broken every record known to mankind.
The one that still stands out to me because it was kind of uncharacteristic of him, but when they won the national championship against Oklahoma in the 2008 BCS title game, he did the big Gator chomp that you saw over and over after a big play. He wasn't really taunting a player, but for Tim Tebow, I guess that was taunting.
After the game, I remember vividly telling the chairman of the Orange Bowl, we didn't just beat Oklahoma today, we beat the economy. And that was because we knew we had a fine team coming back, despite the fact that that was really the height of the financial crisis in the United States. And every other school in the country was seeing a decline, significant dip in season sales. We felt like we were going to overcome that particular year in 2009 off the championship season.
Philippians 4:13, you can do all things through Christ who strengthens you. So thank you, God bless, and I appreciate all you. Thank you so much. Oh, and by the way, one more thing. Let's do it again. I'm coming back.
Coming off another national title, and with most of the team coming back, the 2009 season was seen as a year that Tim Tebow and the Gators could do something that had never been done in school history, go undefeated. But while the Gators lived up to expectations with an undefeated regular season, the coverage of Tim Tebow was at epic proportions and left some of his teammates out in the cold.
There was some resentment, no question about it.
I can tell you there was some.
The attention he got was over the top, far more so than what Danny Werfel got, for example. And yeah, there was some resentment on the part of other players who felt like it was all about Tim Tebow and less about the Gators.
There were some issues from some players toward Tim, but I believe also that they also understood his value to the team.
They won. Winning heals almost everything. And when you're 26-1, as the Gators were heading into the Alabama game over a period of time, you tend to tolerate a few things that annoy you. And I don't think they blamed Tim for it, which is probably why it didn't become an issue that became divisive in any way.
After running the table during the 2009 regular season, the Alabama Crimson Tide awaited the Gators in Atlanta for the chance to win an SEC championship and go on to the national title game. The Gators were only able to put up 13 points on offense and lost to Alabama 32-13.
Touchdown, Alabama!
The images of Tebow on the sideline are images that will last forever in the minds of Florida fans and symbolize how close to the end Tim Tebow and Gator Nation were to losing their beloved quarterback.
No player around here has ever taken a loss harder. I think that the problem with the 2009 football season, it was the most joyless 13-1 ever assembled.
I don't think any Gator fan enjoyed 2009. And the reason I don't think they enjoyed 2009 is because after every game I used to hear people say, we didn't win big enough, we didn't blow them out.
I thought that was really a disservice to those kids. They didn't enjoy winning their first 12 games. They really didn't, and that's a shame. That should never happen.
A lot of people have fun with the fact that Tebow was crying or this, that, and the other. He wanted to be part of the first ever wire-to-wire undefeated championship team in school history.
That, I think, is one of the more lamentable things about the Tim Tebow era. The 09 season produced no joy, even though it produced some great wins.
He would have been always remembered probably, eventually, but the success that we had at that point solidified it without a doubt.
The last game Tim Tebow ever played for the Gators was on January 1st, 2010. The Cincinnati Bearcats stood no chance against Florida as the Gators rolled to a 51-24 victory. Tim Tebow, through his 4 years as a Gator, produced an era never seen before in Gainesville. But as a famous philosopher once said, all good things must come to an end. And after the final horn sounded, Tebow time was over, and the University of Florida, Gainesville, and the Florida football team have never been the same.
I think that when you look at the year it was in 2010, I mean, he was the storyline going into that season, and because who was going to replace Tim Tebow? I mean, it was almost like who's going to replace Peyton Manning when he came out at Tennessee, or who's going to replace the next great player of any program. That's what John Brantley was faced with.
As the curtain closed on Tebow time and a new era of Gator football began in 2010, the cloud of Tebow still hung over the football program and the University of Florida. As the next 4 seasons came and went, Florida fans and those around the program began to see how Tim Tebow, after he moved on to the NFL and later to ESPN, still had a lasting impact on and off the field, for better or for worse. On the field, expectations were still through the roof as a quarterback by the name of John Brantley was tasked with continuing the tradition Tebow helped revive. With the recent success of the program, Gator fans and maybe some of the players expected that success to continue. With expectations mounting, at a new quarterback under center, the pressure was on Brantley to lead the Gators into the next decade of Florida football.
To me, it's got to be one of the hardest things in sports. Tebow did so much in his 4 years, 2 national titles, a Heisman Trophy. So you really can't replace a guy like that. You just hope that the guy who comes in and replaces him, he's good enough to have a good team to build around, and they have success.
It's just hard to follow a legend. The guy that followed Babe Ruth, the guy that followed Lou Gehrig in baseball, Roger Maris. It's tough. For Roger Maris hits 61 home runs, it's hard to hit 62 home runs.
As the 2010 season opened for the Gators, John Brantley was touted by some as a better passing quarterback than Tim Tebow. Because of that, some people felt that the offense for the Gators, especially the passing game, could thrive on the arm of Brantley.
I think he's, a guy that can probably throw the ball vertically on a consistent basis, maybe better than Tebow. So I was excited for him.
They started off, you remember, 4-0, and then they went up to Alabama. Alabama was, I think, #1 at the time. And this was the first real test for the Gators post-Tebow. And they go up and they lose 31-6. And then from there, you realize that, okay, Florida did lose a lot of talent.
After the loss to Alabama, Florida football came crashing back to reality. Brantley and the Gators won 1 game in the month of October.
And up the middle goes Chris Rainey. Touchdown, Gators.
A 34-31 win in overtime against Georgia. Florida would finish the 2010 season with 8 wins and 5 losses. Tebow amassed only 7 losses in his 4 seasons as a Gator, 4 of those losses coming in 1 season. To make matters even worse, Cam Newton, the former Gator quarterback, was making national headlines as he tore through the SEC slate, showing off the talent that got him recruited to Gainesville in 2007. Newton's time at Florida was forgettable due to a number of off-the-field incidents, which eventually led him leaving UF. But with Tebow on the roster, he was expendable. One could only imagine where Florida football would have been with Newton on the 2010 Gators squad.
It's unfortunate when you have an off-the-field incident that leads to, Cam Newton leaving. And it's very rare when think about it, you have 2 eventual Heisman Trophy winning quarterbacks on the same team. Very unusual.
Cam Newton realized how good he was, and he realized how good Tim Tebow was, and he came to the conclusion that I'm not going to play much. He could have switched to another position. He was so darn talented, and he just said, I'll go somewhere where I can play.
But there's no doubting his abilities in the NFL right now, and Tim Tebow isn't. So I think that kind of says a lot of things.
So because of that, if a young quarterback has a great year, if a young quarterback, sophomore, wins the Heisman Trophy, when you go out on the recruiting trail to find another quarterback, they're not going to answer your calls.
Due to the success of Tim Tebow and the stranglehold he had on the quarterback spot for 3 seasons, it was difficult to recruit depth at the quarterback position. So with Cam Newton gone, a roughed-up John Brantley came into the 2011 season without any experienced players to back him up. Couple that with instability at the top of the program, with Urban Meyer choosing to leave, and you had a recipe for disaster coming in 2011.
I don't think anything with John Brantley was going to be fair, just because of the dynamics at work that were totally out of his control. I mean, you can call it the Tebow factor, whatever you want to call it, but there's just something about, those 4 years with Tebow that this program had never experienced.
But the simple fact of the matter is the talent level isn't as good. Check the recent NFL drafts compared to 2006, 7, 8, and 9. And then look at what has happened in the NFL draft the last few years. It's dramatic. It is a dramatic drop-off.
23 former Gators were drafted in the 2007 through 2010 NFL drafts. Since 2010, only 18 Gators have been selected in the draft. The most Gators ever selected, 10 in 1978. But 9 Gators were chosen in the 07 and 2010 drafts, and 3 Gators went in the first round in 2010. In 2011, the Gators opened the season 4-0 under first-year head coach Will Muschamp. But once again, the Alabama game was the turning point in the season for the Gators. But this time, The damage done by the Crimson Tide was devastating.
And Brantley's hurt his knee. He hurt his knee on that play.
People were feeling good about the team, and Johnny was fitting the offense pretty well, and you had a new coach and all that, and then your quarterback goes down, and you've got true freshmen.
I knew it was going to get messy because behind Brantley at the time, you had two true freshmen in Jeff Driscoll and Jacoby Brissett.
He gets his ankle broken or injured late in the first half of that ball game, and was never again the same player.
They never really did recover. While Brantley did come back and play in the Georgia game, the offense never looked the same.
I think that injury probably signified the post-Tebow era.
After Brantley went down with a lower leg injury in the Alabama game, he was never the same quarterback. Durability became an issue for Brantley, an issue that rarely showed up during Tebow's career. Now, the immediate fate of the 2011 season rested on the arms and legs of two quarterbacks only a few months removed from their senior proms.
Season's over. Freshmen don't win in the SEC. True freshman quarterbacks do not win SEC championships or SEC division titles. It just doesn't happen.
Felt sorry for John.
Unfortunate.
Always felt bad for John.
Here's a guy that waited his turn, waited his opportunity behind a legend to play at the University of Florida, a school he wanted to play with, and he gets injured.
It was unrealistic to expect him, or really too many others, to come in and win like Tebow won. He's not Tim Tebow.
You had two true freshman quarterbacks backing up Johnny Brantley. That's a fault in recruiting, and part of knowing that once Tebow became a great player as a sophomore, you're not going to recruit a quarterback for a while. So there was no depth at the position whatsoever.
Florida finished the 2011 season 7-6, and Brantley moved on to the NFL. 2012 was the first season post-Tebow that the Gators had real success in the field. But still, after a 7-0 start with a win over Texas A&M and Johnny Manziel and victories over LSU and South Carolina, the buzz around the team was not the same as it was in the 07 to 09 seasons.
Oh, it's not even close.
Fans don't love the fact that your punter has a 43.3-yard net. Coaches do. Fans, throw a touchdown, will you?
Florida people want offense.
This is a school and a university on football that was built on great offense.
Touchdown, Florida!
Even though they won, I think fans still want to see more offense.
Well, at times, that offense wasn't entertaining. Yet they won, double-digit games. But it didn't seem to satisfy some of the fan base. They wanted more.
The quarterback at Florida, and most places, but especially Florida, the quarterback is the fan guy. That's who they're looking at to see. And that goes clear back to when I was in school here in the 50s. The quarterback's always the guy that they're looking at.
When Tebow was here, they were winning. They were winning with a guy who, at the quarterback position, was charismatic. Fans loved him. He got national attention.
Jeff Driscoll was the guy for the Gators in that season up until the Georgia game in Jacksonville. The game was filled with turnovers on both sides.
Intercepted. Picked off by Neron Ball, number 11.
But the Gators had the ball with a chance to score and then attempt to tie the ball game and keep Florida's national title hopes alive.
Driscoll got it. Jordan Reed fumbles it into the end zone. Wow, touchback.
That was devastating. I mean, you look at that game, Florida never had the lead.
From there, the national title hopes are pretty much over.
Driscoll and the Gators would win 4 of their next 5 games, with the season culminating in a 33-23 loss to Louisville.
Driscoll comes out throwing, and it's intercepted.
With Teddy Bridgewater and former Gators assistant coach Charlie Strong. Florida finished the 2012 season with an impressive 11-2 record.
To the corner, McKinnon, touchdown.
It was the perfect storm of everything could go wrong, went wrong.
Well, you look at that season, and I think it was the perfect storm.
Key guys getting hurt.
And I don't care what anybody says, when you lose the amount of people that Florida lost on both sides of the ball, that is going to take a toll.
As 2013 was approaching, prospects for another good season for the Gators seemed likely with the success the team had the previous year. But things would go bad, and go bad quickly for U of F. And as months have passed, the 2013 season is a wound that is yet to heal.
Ugh. Do I have to?
Ooh, it was rough.
I was excited going into 2013 because I had seen the growth in Jeff Driscoll. I had seen the leadership in the summer, the guys getting the job done. And we get into fall camp, and I knew it was going to be a tough year.
I was here for 0-10-1 in '79.
The final score, Florida State 27, Florida 16.
So I know it can get worse than 4-8. It can get a lot worse than 4-8.
They beat Toledo in the opening game.
Play action, wide open, touchdown, Florida. Getting it a jog beat.
Then they go down to Miami. And the Miami game last year, or in 2013 for the Gators, kind of played out like that Georgia game in 2012. Florida had every chance to win the game. Their offense moved the ball, their defense made enough plays to win the game, but in the end, turnovers killed them.
Driscoll would struggle against the Canes, throwing 2 interceptions in the game, along with some turnovers from his teammates. Florida lost 21-16 to Miami, heading into their bye week.
There was kind of a sour mood after that game, especially among the Florida fan base, because you knew that that game was there for the winning, and you lost it down there, so they had to come back. And next game at home against Tennessee, Driscoll gets hurt.
Driscoll again, no blitz. From the backside, Driscoll intercepted. And here we go down the sidelines. Devon Swafford, untouched. There are no flags. Tennessee, touchdown. And on top of that, Driscoll is hurt.
The Gators would win that afternoon in the Swamp, but in victory, they suffered a crippling loss.
Jeff Driscoll is done for the year.
It was a big deal in 11. It was an even bigger deal in 2013 when the team just really fell apart after losing not only their quarterback, but 3 days later on the practice field, they lose Dominique Easley.
Almost like in 2010 or 2011 with John Brantley, except this time more severe. You lose Jeff Driscoll without really any experience behind him. And the wheels truly did fall off.
So your best player and your leader on each side of the ball is gone, and you've still got 9 games to play.
I'm not sure if I thought they would struggle as badly, but I thought they would struggle. Driscoll, to me, was the clear starter and the best quarterback on the team. And I think if you look back, fans every week would criticize Jeff Driscoll, but then at the end of the year, they kind of wish they had him back.
I knew they were in big trouble when Driscoll went down.
Injuries would continue to pile up for the Gators. Tyler Murphy stepped in for the Gators and had some success beating Kentucky and Arkansas, then hurt his shoulder in a 17-6 loss to LSU. The Gators would reel off 4 more losses before a matchup with Georgia Southern.
Down to 15 as late substitutions come in. Alan Lee checks out. Contrella Showers back in as a wideout. Second down, 10 at the Gator 14-yard line. Go Van, your B-back. McKinnon and Bryant, your slot back. Ball middle of the field. Here's the snap. Quick toss. McKinnon right side. Great block. Gets him to the 10, to the 5. Put an Eagle 6 on it. Touchdown, Georgia Southern.
No, I didn't think that was possible.
No, you didn't see that loss coming.
Yes. When you can't score, you can lose to anybody. When your offense can't score, you can lose to anybody.
Georgia Southern has good talent. They've had good talent for a long time and at their level.
This wasn't the Georgia Southern teams with Tracy Ham and the Ham Bone back in the 80s. I mean, Georgia Southern's had some great teams, don't get me wrong. And they've had some teams loaded with talent, and they have a system. But this was a Georgia Southern team that lost 3 or 4 games coming in to FCS opponents, basically. So I didn't see that happening.
Our fans don't appreciate that another team has good talent when they're unknowns. And maybe your own players don't, they say, Georgia Southern, that's like Catawba or something.
There was a level of just shock. And then, there was also anger. I mean, Muschamp and the players after the game, you could tell these guys, they were mad. I mean, this wasn't supposed to happen.
After the eventual national champion Florida State Seminoles took care of business in Gainesville the following week.
It was painful because you'd go into game. There aren't many times the University of Florida takes to the field, and I just look out there and I say, there's no shot. There's no chance. Florida State came to town last year. There was no chance.
The Gainers finished the year with 4 wins and 8 losses, the first losing record for the Florida football program since 1979. The Gators missed their first bowl game since 1990 and lost to a current football championship subdivision team for the first time since 1946. Florida football had officially hit rock bottom, and the success of Tim Tebow and the former rosters filled with NFL stars was a distant memory.
And it just goes to show you, even a program like Florida, you can lose 10, 15, 20 guys to injury. They're going to struggle against smaller schools and smaller programs, and it can happen to anybody.
You have a situation where they're playing a tough schedule too, the perfect storm, and that's why they finished where they finished.
So where does Florida football go from here? How does the program recover from one of the worst seasons Florida football has seen in over 30 years? Jeff Driscoll is back and healthy, and the Gators have a young group of quarterbacks behind him, led by 2013 Mr. Football USA Will Grier, along with new offensive coordinator Kurt Roper. The prospects for the 2014 season and beyond are looking good.
Florida's, obviously at a difficult point. It's not one that I thought I'd ever see.
Is it going to be better? Well, yeah, it better be, because Muschamp won't be around.
Better get better in a hurry, and I think it will.
There's no question this is a huge year for Coach Muschamp.
This program can bounce back fast.
I think what Roper runs is much better suited for Jeff Driscoll.
I think he's going to have a surprisingly good year.
Is it going to win a national championship this year? No.
They have to be healthy because they can't fill in. They need the offensive tackles and Jeff Driscoll to stay healthy. If that happens, the offense will score at least 10 more points a game than it did last year. There's a prediction for you. If those guys stay healthy, they will be closer to a 30-point-a-game team instead of a 19-point-a-game team, which is what they averaged last year.
There's too much going on here. You got too much super positive stuff involved. You've got tradition, you've got championships, you've got great players, Heisman Trophy winners, you've got good coaching staff, you've got a wonderful stadium, you got a solid fan base.
So, I think if you win 8 or 9 this year with a tough schedule, now you're on the right track.
And that's the great thing about football. It's a whole new chapter this year. It's a whole new season. Nothing's carried over from last year. You get a fresh start.
Will Grier, a highly decorated recruit from North Carolina, seems to be the guy that will lead the Gators at the quarterback position when Driscoll moves on, according to most college football recruiting gurus. Chris Leak is the last great Florida quarterback to come out of North Carolina, and those around the program are hoping Grier can replicate the success Leak had during his career at Florida.
I've heard nothing but really good things about Will Grier.
He's got a bazooka attached to his right shoulder.
This is a guy who once threw for 10 touchdowns in a game.
He may be the quarterback in 2015. He may be the quarterback in 2016. He may be the quarterback week 2.
He just looks like he belongs. He walks and talks and acts like he's been here for a while.
Grier played at a small school. Well, how will he adapt to the big stage? How will he adapt to playing in front of 90,000 people and playing in the SEC? We don't know that yet.
To say he's the next guy is a little premature. Treon Harris is coming out of Miami, Booker T. Washington from a great program where they compete.
Since the departure of Tim Tebow after the 2009 season, 9 players have thrown at least one pass for the Gators. John Brantley, Jordan Reed, Trey Burton, Jeff Driscoll, Jacoby Brissett, John Crowfoot, Tyler Murphy, Skylar Morningwig, and Kyle Christie all threw at least one pass for the Gators since the 2010 season. Tebow, in his career, threw for 9,285 yards. The 9 pass throwers after him combined for less, 8,763 yards. And Tebow only threw 33 passes his freshman season.
It just shows you of an offense that has struggled post-Tebow. And it's partly because of Tim Tebow, what he gave the offense. The level of performance has dropped off, and not surprisingly when you look at kind of just how unstable that position has been, that offense has been since 2009.
The bigger impact is the large turnover in offensive coordinators since Tim has left. Steve Adazio was the offensive coordinator, and then Charlie Weiss was the offensive coordinator, and then Brent Pease was the offensive coordinator, and now it's Kurt Roper as the offensive coordinator. So that's several guys in a very short period of time. That has much more of an impact on the development or lack of development offensively.
The impact of Tebow time stretched way beyond the football field. Numerous studies have shown that in addition to the academic reputation of a university, previous success in football can impact not only the athletic department, but the university as a whole.
The Gators being in the 06 and the 08 national championships were huge, not just for the athletic department, which benefited from greater donations and exposure. Obviously, there's a recruiting benefit. It's great for the university.
During that period of time, the University of Florida was experiencing unprecedented success. It was the only school in the history of collegiate athletics at the Division I level to win a football national championship and a men's basketball national championship in the same year.
Following national championships in basketball in 2006 and 2007, and BCS national titles in football in 2006 and 2008. In 2006, U of F received 22,000 applications, accepting 48% of students who applied. In just 2 more years, Florida saw a rise in over 5,000 applications from 06 to 08, with the acceptance rate of those applying dropping to an amazing 39%.
About 15% of their incoming class had a GPA below a 3.69 in 2007. In just 5 years, that percentage went down from 15% to 3%. So it became much more difficult to get into University of Florida.
It matters because in order to keep us in the national rankings and to have a variety of programs, bringing students in who are going to actually come through our educational experience here contributes to those rankings. I think that UF sells itself not only on the sports, but on just basically on the fact that this is a very vast and diverse learning community.
The Tim Tebow era was a time of unprecedented success and prosperity for the University of Florida football program and for the University of Florida. But as the days, months, and years pass, Florida needs another player to come along and captivate the hearts and minds of Gator fans, students, and alumni. And most of us who bleed orange and blue are hoping he, whomever he is coming sooner than later.
You will never see another Tim Tebow anywhere because they just don't grow them like that anymore.
Being optimistic, yeah, I think we will.
Anybody had been around him, anybody who had talked to him, anybody that just spent a little bit of time felt touched by him.
I think the other thing about Tim, in terms of there are some people who think he's a failure because he hasn't made it in the NFL. Well, I couldn't disagree with that more because it doesn't matter. Tim Tebow's legacy in terms of the University of Florida, Gator fans, college football will never go away. He was one of the best college football players to ever play the game, in my opinion. The results speak for themselves.
There will be another great player at the University of Florida. There will be another #1 draft pick quarterback, wide receiver, running back. There will be another Heisman Trophy winner, but they won't be the next anything. They will be the first of them. They get to write their own legacy, and for all we know, they're writing it right now.
You already know. We're back to drop and go. I'm on my way to the